Crews in Israel are searching for survivors following Iran's latest barrage of missiles and drones. We're going to get right to Trey Yingst, who is live on the scene in Tel Aviv. Trey, tell us what you're seeing. From what I'm hearing from our people in the booth, it's pretty volatile where you are right now.
Yeah, Ashley, there was just a large-scale Iranian ballistic missile barrage toward Tel Aviv. One of those missiles slipped past air defense systems and slammed into the buildings behind me. This is a residential area of Tel Aviv. This is an area that people are known, and we're just going to move 1 second because they're trying to clear out this area, Ashley, as we talk, and my cameraman is going to show you the scene here as we move. But again, this is in Tel Aviv, Israel's second largest city, and you can see that these crews are trying to get a fire under control. They are looking through these buildings to make sure that no one is trapped under the rubble. I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buildings directly affected by this. And again, the police are just moving people around here as they try to clear a path for the first responders and ambulances that have arrived here on the scene. Ashley, as we move forward here, we will learn more and be able to report more about the location. But broadly, I can say that we are in Tel Aviv, Israel's second largest city. The Army and police are aware of our location. We coordinate these things to make sure that we're not giving away any details that could be harmful to first responders or the people on the scene. But just to describe what we are seeing here, when we arrived, it was still dark. There was a man who was injured. His name was Gal. He was bleeding from his legs. And I talked to him and I said, "What happened? How are you? How are you feeling?" He said, "My ears are ringing. I can barely hear you." He said he has glass injuries to his legs and he was waiting to get medical attention. He was just one of a number of people who was injured, and you can see there's about 10 or 15 journalists at this location we're at, and we're just going to push back a little bit here, Ashley. But again, the latest information that we have, there has been a ballistic missile attack launched by Iran at central Israel. One of those missiles slipping past air defense systems and slamming into the ground below, causing damage to 4 or 5 buildings in Tel Aviv. First responders, you can see, are here on the scene. They have gloves, hard hats, and torch lamps. They are now going into the buildings to try and see if they can find any survivors or other people that were injured. I want to just show you across the street here, Ashley. There's a massive amount of damage to this very tall building, and it just shows you the blast wave and radius of such a blast when something like this takes place. And so we will find out more information in the minutes, hours ahead. But what we know right now, a number of people have been injured. We can confirm that because we saw it when we arrived here on the scene. When we got here, this entire parking lot was on fire. Cars were crushed and smashed, and first responders ran into the blaze and they started to put out the fire. As the fire died down, we could really start to see the full scope of what happened here and start to count the buildings that were affected by this blast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's shrapnel to this building, 7. This entire facade over here on this building destroyed. And it just gives you a sense of how destructive these Iranian missiles are when they land in the center part of Israel, these densely populated areas filled with Israeli civilians. Ashley?
You know, Trey, when you were talking, I saw in the video there was a little girl with her backpack on walking with her dad, and it looked like her brother. And I just want to point out it's 5:15 a.m. in Tel Aviv. I can imagine this is when people are starting to get up and they're going to school and trying to live their normal lives. How does this attack and what you're seeing on the ground compare to what you saw when this first initially happened last week on that first attack?
Yeah, Ashley, I'm going to have my cameraman Yaniv show you the scene here in Tel Aviv. But that first attack, when we were live on Fox and you saw those ballistic missiles raining down on this city, this was the first indication that the Iranians do possess the ability to strike deep into Israel and cause significant damage. And when you see the scene here, and we are shooting from just a small distance from the impact location, again, after checking with the police and checking with the Army to ensure that we're not giving away any operational security, we arrived here and saw this was yet another missile attack causing this much damage. They're using similar missiles, as to your question, that they used on the first day responding to the Israeli strikes targeting Iranian nuclear facilities and top IRGC officials. What has changed, though, is as the pressure continues to increase on the Israeli air defense system, it starts to create a situation where the Israelis can't reload as quickly, they can't shoot down all of this incoming fire, and then ultimately it puts Israel in a place where they have to simply tell the population to go into bomb shelters and hope. Because as you can see with this damage here, Ashley, even if you are in a shelter, something fortified with concrete that normally Israelis would go to if there's a rocket attack or something similar, it's not enough for these missiles. These missiles are so large and they have such a large warhead on top that even being in a shelter doesn't necessarily mean that you will be protected, but it is certainly better than being on the street or just being near windows or walls. Here at the scene, I'm just trying to, as daylight is starting to come together here, I'm trying to get a better picture of this area. Without giving away too much of the location, I will broadly say that this is an area, it's quite close to where we are reporting from in Tel Aviv often, before this round of conflict began. And there are coffee shops here. There are oftentimes people going for runs. It's a residential area, and it's an area that is now under direct fire from the Iranian regime. This speaks to the targets that the Iranians are picking out. They are not simply just targeting military installations in Israel. They are going after the heart of cities. They are targeting residential areas. They are hitting apartment buildings. You saw on Fox the images that we brought you from central Israel earlier today, where they were digging through debris looking for bodies. And there was a man there, and he was sitting in a wheelchair in a hospital gown. And we talked to his friend, and he said he was pulled from the rubble. His father was still stuck under the debris. They took this man to the hospital, and he insisted that the doctors and nurses take him back to the scene, and he wait as these first responders tried to dig out his father. These are humans. They're just like us. They like to go to coffee shops. They like to go to the beach. They're peaceful people, and they have been targeted following the Israeli strikes against Iran. And as you can see in the distance behind me, this is a very difficult moment for this country, because officials and sources that we talk to every day tell us the following days are going to be incredibly difficult, Ashley. They will take casualties. There will be significant destruction to residential areas of this country. But the Israelis say they knew this was the price going into an operation that they started. They started with strikes against nuclear facilities in Iran. They started with strikes against the ballistic missile program of Iran, and they took out officials from the IRGC. But the Israelis tell us this was the price that they knew they would have to pay in order to reduce those threats against the state of Israel and to try to stabilize a region that is rapidly unraveling. Ashley?
Yeah, and you make a very good point. It's a residential area, and obviously you don't want to give anything away past that. But these are people just living their lives. This is exactly the type of thing we do. We get up, we go to school, we take our kids to school, we go to work, we go sit down and have coffee with our family and our friends. But this is what they're having to deal with today, which is a Monday morning. It's supposed to be a normal Monday morning for them. Iran has made it clear that they don't care about the loss of life that is happening in Israel when they send these rockets into these residential areas. Have you seen, is it still too early, or have you seen anybody be brought out of these buildings? Have you been able to speak to anyone other than the man you spoke to that you referenced?
We saw a couple people being brought out of this area. The concern is that many of them are trapped in these partially collapsed buildings. And that's why these first responders have made sure that all of the crews that have arrived here are at a safe distance. They're going into these buildings and starting to dig and try to get information if anyone's trapped under the debris. But that man that we talked to, Gal, he was still in shock. And I just asked him, I said, Achi, which is bro in Hebrew, are you okay? He said he's okay, but his ears were ringing because the explosion was so loud. He didn't have a bomb shelter in his building, so he went to the stairwell. It's the next best thing for Israelis who live in older buildings in cities like Tel Aviv. And I don't even know that he noticed, but he was bleeding from both of his legs. He had injuries from glass and metal. When the explosion happened, it hit him. And you can only imagine he was in a building that wasn't directly hit from what we understand. You can imagine the types of injuries that would happen to someone who was in one of those buildings. When you see someone like this, it really highlights what's happening here. It highlights the fact that the population is doing what they can when these alerts come in, but it does take time to get to shelters. They do have a text message alert that goes out to people, but at the end of the day, this is a volatile situation that Israeli officials say is in some ways the nightmare scenario they were trying to prepare for.
Trey, when you talk about that text message system, about those missiles incoming, do you know how long they have in advance before they know it's going to hit, or at least in their general area?
So broadly, they have about 10 minutes when they know missiles are being launched from Iran. And as they get closer, there's a 90-second warning, and you start to hear the air raid sirens sounding across Tel Aviv. And that's the moment that if you're not already in a shelter, you need to get to one or to get to cover. The issue is that when these attacks happen in the middle of the night, it's challenging. Sometimes people are so exhausted, they sleep through the alarms. They don't see the text, or they simply just don't go to the shelter. And it can be deadly. As we saw today, they were pulling bodies out of the rubble of this apartment building. And again, I just want to show you the scene here, Ashley, as the sun rises here in Tel Aviv. You can see the aftermath of this strike more clearly. I have been to this area, and I'm being, again, very careful about talking about this. I've been to this area countless times. It is an area with coffee shops. It is an area filled with a very popular spot to live as a young person in Tel Aviv, because you can run, you can end up going to areas where other people gather. And it is now the site of a ballistic missile attack and a tragedy for the Israeli people. You can see right now they're taking a drone into the air to see if they can gather any information from the rooftops and see if anyone was on these upper floors. Ashley?
Trey, you said that you saw bodies being brought out of this particular missile strike.
Earlier in the day, we were at another site where first responders were pulling bodies out. And as they were pulling those bodies out from a different area of central Israel, not this location, they had the media step back as a sign of respect. And this is something that we often adhere to. I remember being here on October 7th and in the days after, when they were pulling bodies out of the police station in the southern city of Sderot and other places. We try to do our best to gather the information that we need to gather to tell the world what's happening here, while taking into account that these are people with families, and also taking into account the serious operational security issues as this war continues. And as we move forward here, and I just want to just show you what it looks like down this sidewalk, you can just see the amount of debris and leaves coming from these trees. There are buildings that are pocked with shrapnel marks, and there are storefronts that are completely smashed. Yaniv, if you'll come with me here, I just want to show you. Careful, watch your step, Yaniv. But I just want to show you inside this store the destruction. And actually, this is an explosion that happened less than an hour ago. I mean, we have just arrived on the scene, but you see the amount of destruction in this store. This is a convenience store, a corner store. It has things like paper towels and flip-flops and batteries, things that people would need if they're living in this area of Tel Aviv. And it has been completely destroyed. Like I said before, this is an area that is packed with civilians. There are no military locations close to where we are. We will have more information to report hopefully later in the day about the significance of this area. I don't want to get into it now, but people will talk about it later today, certainly. In terms of what happens now, these first responders will stay on the scene. They'll try to gather as much information as they can from people who came out of these buildings to know if anyone was trapped. You just give me 1 second. Stay with me here. סליחה? 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 מה אתה אנגלית? Anglית, a little bit? Can you just tell us a little bit about the scene here and what you've seen since you arrived? A little bit in English. We're live to America. What should people know? Just in English, Anglais.
No, introduce it.
And what should people know about what happened here?
There is a missile hit in the street, and there is a damage for some building. We take off all the fire and search after injuries and trampled people.
Are you worried that there could be people under the rubble?
Yeah, until we not get into the building, we are still worried that there is some people.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. And so you can see this is a local fire personnel. There are medics on the scene, but he just there talked about what is the biggest concern right now, Ashley, and that is the possibility that there are people trapped under the rubble and debris from these collapsed buildings. And that's really in the minutes and hours ahead, and these are critical minutes because if people are injured and they survive the initial blast, they want to get to them as quickly as possible. In the distance, they're currently setting up a tent. We have seen this tent before, and this tent is used for people to check in the neighborhood, and they will give their names and they will give their addresses and any relatives or friends or family members that they have in the area to ensure that they can account for everyone. Right now, there are people unaccounted for. You heard directly from that local fire chief. Still, as we speak right now, Ashley, and you're going to see it in a moment, they are bringing in stretchers, preparing for the worst. We'll be very careful about what we show you here live. And in the distance, there are ambulances, and they're waiting to just see. And here's one of those orange stretchers that's being taken in by these first responders on the scene who immediately rushed to this site. Again, when we arrived here, everything was on fire. You couldn't even see the buildings. There were so many flames. As the firefighters got them extinguished, we started to gather more about what happened here, which was clearly a direct hit of an Iranian ballistic missile. Ashley.
Yeah, and I just want to point out to anyone who's watching, whatever you're seeing on your screen behind Trey and the damage, whatever it looks like in this scene, it is a million times worse in real life where Trey is. You couldn't even fathom to explain and describe. I mean, you're doing a great job of describing what you're seeing, Trey, and we obviously want you to stay safe. And it's hard to see and it's hard to watch. It's hard to talk about. But also, I want to talk about these first responders. They are worn completely thin doing this. What have they been telling you with the first responders and the crews, the rescue crews that you're talking to? How are they feeling? Because this is very tough on them.
Yeah, Ashley, it's all hands on deck for these crews. They are using the Army and first responder units in the Army to respond to these scenes. And I talked to a few guys yesterday at a different site in central Israel, guys about my age, and I said, look, are you guys in the Army all the time? And they said, no, we're in what's called Miluim, reserve duty here. And they worked in high-tech jobs in Tel Aviv, and they have gone into the Army. They were called up because of this war that has now erupted between Israel and Iran. And they were at a site basically saying, we never thought we were going to have to use these skills, just given the fact that their unit is an emergency unit in the Army. It's a last resort for when other teams are overwhelmed, firefighters and medics in the area. And so the fact that they were called up and responding to scenes, digging through rubble, looking for survivors, it speaks to just how challenging this moment is for Israel. And again, as we speak, the Israelis are continuing airstrikes against positions inside of Iran. And Iranian officials earlier in the day, just yesterday, talked about the fact that they're not willing to stop firing these ballistic missiles. And the Israelis have indicated they're not willing to stop striking Iran. So this is far from over. And the reality is that these major population centers like Tel Aviv are going to continue to pay a very heavy price with these missiles raining down. When this explosion happened, we were in a shelter in Tel Aviv, relatively far from here, not walking distance, and it shook the entire building that we were in. And I talked to a few people I know that live around here, and they said something terrible has happened. They could hear it, they could feel it. When these strikes happen, it shakes the ground, and it destroys all of the buildings in its path, in the blast radius of something like this. And again, as we get more light here, the scene is coming into reality. The aftermath of this strike is coming into reality. And as you heard from that fire chief directly, Ashley, their biggest concern is that there are Israeli civilians trapped under the rubble.
Trey, I don't know if you're seeing what I'm seeing, but I'm seeing a baby that looks probably about 8 months old being brought out, and it is absolutely heartbreaking.
We're going to actually move positions if you can stay with us here.
Yeah, of course. They're bringing babies out. They're bringing kids out. I mean, this is just from what I'm seeing in your shot now. I'm sure there's tons of children being brought out with their families that you're seeing right now.
We're leaving. Yes, and that's part of what we're trying to do here is get a better picture of that. And it's a bit of negotiation here with these first responders. Of course, it's a very tense scene. But when you move in these areas, their biggest concern is that there are buildings that could collapse. There are... Toda. Okay, just 1 second. Stay with me, Ashley. Toda Rabba. Just stay with me, Ashley. We're trying to get to that area that you are discussing where people are being taken. And so we're just walking here in Tel Aviv. But again, you're going to see the tent that I talked about as we walk by here. And actually, this is important to explain as we're live here, Ashley. The tent off to my right here is used by teams that are trained in first response. They have computers and they have information about the local residents so that they can try to start accounting for people. And just stay with me here, Ashley, because we just need to watch where we're going. You're going to see a lot of first responders in this area. These are the teams that are waiting for people that are being taken out.
Are these medic
and just
teams,
give me 1 moment. Yes, these are medic teams, and I'm going to just show you a different vantage point here. You can see down here, these are all medics from United Hatzalah. And just stay with me. I just need to talk to the team for 1 second, Ashley. We're going to stand right here. Okay, here, beseder?
No,
Beseder. And so we're just moving back a little bit here as these teams continue to work. But I'll just show you a little bit more damage across the street here, Ashley. Again, this speaks to the blast radius when these things happen. And just be mindful of some of these signs, Yaniv. Shoot this direction. And if you look down here, you're going to see a lot of damage to storefronts. You can hear those alarms that are going off. And we won't stay in this location too long as to not to keep it so loud. But again, behind me in the distance, there are teams still going through this debris, looking for any survivors that may be trapped still under the rubble. Ashley?
You know, I'm seeing just in the video box next to you, it looks like an older woman being brought out. How many people, like I said, this is just what I'm seeing from the video that you guys are shooting right now. How many people are you seeing them bring out right now?
I can't see the video that you are showing,
okay.
And
so
from what we understand, there are multiple. At this vantage point, we are not, and we also understand there are multiple impact scenes. And just stay with me here, Ash. I'm going to get away from this loud noise so that you can hear me a little bit better. We understand that there are multiple impact scenes, and so it may be somewhere else in central Israel. It may be in a location close to here. And I'm just going to show you here as these teams of first responders, they have all of this gear ready. They're prepared for these scenarios. They're often considered worst-case scenarios, but they are prepared. They're ready. And that is what we're seeing now, the plan into action. But I think what is the most important point to this, and I'm just going to show you this area, and before I show it to you, you need to stay 1 second, Ashley.
Yeah.
Stay pointed here. I want to give you some instructions because, again, I don't want to give away the location that we're at. Try to just shoot the front of this location. But if you look into here, wrong direction, into here, you will see that this is a coffee shop. There's no sign, doesn't tell you the exact location, but it's a coffee shop. It's where people gather, and it's actually a relatively new coffee shop. This is 2 blocks away from the epicenter of this blast. We're still, as we speak, and we'll pan over here, they are, and you can see they're bringing in a generator there. They're trying to get the situation under control. I'm not sure where those images, and actually here there's a dog that you're going to see over here, I think that's just someone else's dog. But you asked earlier about something that I'll give you the answer to now. As we're kind of moving here, I'm thinking about a lot of things at one time. You asked earlier about the first responders, Ashley. And to tell you about them, they're people, most of them who have day jobs in high tech, where they work in bars or restaurants. And they have volunteered in many cases to come into a reserve role during this war and to help and do what they can. And so today we were at the scene and they were in a circle, and they were basically trying to keep their spirits high, understanding that the work that they were about to do is some of the most horrific work that you could imagine, taking people's loved ones from under the debris in the aftermath of a ballistic missile strike. And that's exactly what is happening here behind me in Tel Aviv today, following the latest strike. And so when we think about what they go through, we've seen a lot of this firsthand. It's challenging to process. And there was a dog earlier today, actually, that they brought. It was a resilience dog. But the first responders were going over to it, and the dog's name was June, and it was a black lab with long hair. And they were petting it. And it was just this moment of peace amid so much chaos here that reminded me of what this is all for in terms of responding to these scenes. It's about trying to make people feel safe and comfortable. And so when we talk about what it's for, why these first responders do what they do, that's why, because they want to be in a situation where they can give back to their community and ensure they can help in any way possible amid this war.